and welcome everybody to this live guide and design and pattern cutting analysis of Schiaparelli Couture 2026. And I'm never 100% sure how to pronounce whether it's Schiaparelli or Schiaparelli. So I'm going to go for the second. And yes, I'm trying out something new. So if you love looking at the sort of recent collections, but they also maybe look at some vintage stuff soon, I thought I'd try out just finding a time in the middle of the day where I can go on and do sort of short live streams. So throughout the week you have your sort of little maybe distraction from daily life or inspiration for your own sewing and pattern cutting projects. And it's just a chance for all of us to get together and look at some beautiful clothes and sort of see how might they be made, how would you pattern cut them, do you like them, don't you like them, how could they inspire a project, or how you could interpret them for yourself. So I'll be back on Wednesday as well, and Friday again at the same time. And hello Natalie, lovely for you to join me. For you it's probably quite a good time across the world. And what I'm going to do in sort of these live streams where I look at something and I work out, or first of all, how is it made, what are the fabrics, how would you pattern cut it, how would you construct it, and also how do you might interpret it for your own clothes. That's exactly the sort of things pattern cutting and learning to pattern cut are great. So if you're already doing sewing patterns, you can learn to pattern hack them, and then at some point you can move to your own block, and then you can just about make anything once you have the knowledge. And with couture, of course, that is a different art form, but we can take the bits we like and reinterpret them for ourselves. And as always, if you want to learn to pattern cut with me, my membership, which is the easiest and most affordable and most flexible way to do it, will be opening in February. So do have a look in the description for the link. But let's have a look at some beautiful haute couture clothes. So what I really liked about this collection, it had a fantastic theme, which was sort of predators, so dangerous animals. And I will show you the most out there is, which was the crocodile. I liked how coherent it is, and also it wasn't too big. A lot of these couture collections now are nearly the same size as a ready-to-wear collection, while with Schiaparelli I thought the storytelling was really at the forefront. So it wasn't always the same, but you could really see the thread running through it while it's still being clothes as well, which I love. Very over-top clothes, of course, but beautiful clothes. So what I loved about this in the wrong hands would have been awful, but the crocodile skin was interpreted beautifully on there. I'm going to show you a few. One of them I didn't actually like, which was this. I just thought there was something with proportions. They felt a bit abrupt. See-through tops and sort of, flashing nipple is quite popular this season. Again, I always think it has been done a lot. What's actually the sort of purpose of it. I quite liked something he did with layers, like this layer and also this, where it's sort of layered, maybe chiffon or organza. I really liked this organza blouse as well, so it was really clever. And I really liked this pleated style because that's sort of classic pattern cutting. This could be a Charles James design. It looks like a mid-century couture gown, but it fits within the theme of predators. So I'm going to swap over to a table and have a look in more detail. And Natalie saying crocodile, very Australian. Yes, I'm not sure it's an alligator or crocodile, so I know there's a difference, but they're both equally scary. I wouldn't want to run across either of them. What I really like about this, and I don't think this is actually one where we can look at it and we can marvel, but I wouldn't recommend trying to make it at home. You can, of course, but what's beautiful, it's that sort of where we know it's all corseted, so it sort of goes above your bust point, and it has that sort of what's been quite fashionable recently, that sort of décolleté or a sort of neckline, which rather than it being sort of normal corset, it sort of goes up and it's sort of like a shield nearly. And then is of course fully fitted But what is fantastic, I'm going to zoom in a second, it's got a slip. So it's like a fully fitted dress. So if I zoom in, can you see the crocodiles actually embossed as such? So it looks like either a fur, or I think it's a velvet which has been embossed. And I want to find out how it's made, because I think that's fascinating. I wouldn't attempt to make it myself, but I think it's something where they've basically embossed, or they molded a fabric and it looks a little bit like velvet into a specific shape. But I really like that they actually have put a bust cup, so it all is in keeping with the actual shape. So I'm going to zoom out again, so leave it like that. So can you see it's actually got the bust cups? So they've either cut them out, so I think they might have sort of made the crocodile hide, embossed it, and I think there might be seams here to get it the shape it is. And they sort of hidden the seams very cleverly within it. And again, they sort of go like that, and they can do all the shaping. But I really thought that was sort of where they actually gone with the design, and these are part of it. So it's like a bit like it's an armor, it's a crocodile. It really looks like the crocodiles you see hanging around, the crocodile hats even, or crocodile you might see in the river if you're Australian. But it's really nice if you wanted to do it for yourself, probably not realistic to emboss velvets in different fabrics and stuff. But what you could do then is that you literally use, for example, the same fabric in different weaves and different prints, and you do it like that, and that's what it basically ends up doing. If you and then they've done the bust out of the smaller one, and I can't quite see how it looks like it's something like there's definitely some sort of seams going like that. So you could do something like that. It'd still be quite a couture one, but you could do a dress like that. It's basically a very fitted dress with some proper couture. That's what I love, is proper couture of the fabric when you're trying to work out how it is. But it does look some velvet. But you could see how you could then, if you had a bigger weave and a smaller weave, or sort of bigger texture, smaller texture, you could sort of recreate it if you wanted to. And then of course it's a proper corset to stand up like that, and it's either interface with a proper construction or fabric, so to hold it all up. So you would have to look into sort of corsetry to do that. And then the skirt is just lots of layers after all. But I just thought this was clever because it is so fantastical, but you can actually see there's garment construction in there. And that's what I like about this construction. There's lots of things where you think, oh, they're garments, but they are actually couture garments, which I really liked. So I'm going to look at, let's have a look at these two. This is just, again, what I love about this, there's a lot of garments, once you start making clothes, you sort of build up your layers, and your layers of knowledge, layers of understanding, you're always sort of getting a bit better, and you start to guess and think, oh yeah, I know how this is made, or I can work it out roughly. With this collection, you're really sort of guessing how it's made. But I think this together with the skirt, if I zoom in again, you can see it's got all these sort of layers going on in organza or netting. I'm not actually 100% sure what it's even made out, which I love as well. But both of them, what they are, I think it is a fabric. It's either an organza, but I think it might be a net, because it doesn't look as stiff as an organza. It looks more like a net, and it doesn't look as, it could be a chiffon as well. But for some reason, I think it's a net. But because, let me zoom in one more time and zoom into that cuff. So it could be some sort of net, or it could be a chiffon. our Natalie is just saying with the last style we looked at, you could use leathers or vinyl with a crocodile print. Yeah, so if you find a textured leather, that'd be perfect for that. That'd be definitely a statement dress. Yeah, I think it's a net or chiffon actually. I've got some organza in a minute. But what I think it is, it's basically the fabric is like an ombre fabric. So the fabric is maybe like, you know, it's like this, which would be the yellow or white at the top. And when it sort of ombres into black, or I've done in blue and green, is what I think I've done. And then they basically cut out the same skirt or same trousers again and again, but they sort of layered it. It always goes down a little bit. And that way you get that sort of ombre effect, but it's made out of maybe 5 layers of fabric. So it's actually, these trousers, they have the red, which is the base layer, and then they have basically 5 layers on top. And I sort of at the bottom here, they're sort of slightly layer to show you again it's a layer, and then here it just shows up because how it's cut out. That's how I think it is done. Again, I will have to sort of try to look at close-ups to see exactly whether it is actually ombre fabric or whether it's different fabrics pieced together, because you can see quite obviously sort of lines up here, which makes me think I'm only 90% sure. But if you, for example, had like a nest or something with a print on it, or you had a chiffon, a sort of ombre chiffon, it would be really beautiful to sort of layer it so it looks like a stone or something, isn't it, or something. And Natalie's just saying the jacket is a very Schiaparelli shape. Yes, that's what I like. It's sort of these collections where are not, it's not an exact copy, but you can sort of see her way of thinking, sort of playing around with storytelling, with imagination, with sort of the fantastical, but still in clothes form. It's always wearable. This is haute couture, of course, so maybe slightly less wearable, but they are clothes. So these are really cute. So I wanted to show you one organza, which was really clever. What I liked about this, because this is when you sort of, it's maybe not the most, Natalie saying the layer idea for chiffon is really exciting. Yeah, and I think because that'd be a really easy way if you had like a dress or skirt. Not easy, but it's actually like it look really exciting, but you could use like even just an A-line skirt or something, and you just lay it again and again, and it's sort of like when it looks like it's really complicated, but it's just where you basically choose to place your pattern on the fabric. So it's something where we can use couture ideas and incorporate that into our own wardrobe. It actually make a beautiful, just if you didn't even need that many layers, but if you made like a top or something, and then you have layers sort of going down, that'd be really nice. You could hand paint your chiffon for that and sort of do the ombre look. That'd be good fun. What I liked about this, the way it actually goes out, you know, like the blouse goes at the waist. It's maybe not, we wouldn't wear it, but it really looks like a scorpion. I quite like that idea of how it's also probably, I think, how she's walking and standing, her posture. But if I zoom in, what I actually really liked is the chiffon construction. So I've put on this sort of peplum as such, which is really nice. Can I move it over a bit more? No, I can't. Make it a little bit smaller. What I loved about this is sort of, it looks a bit like there's a Givenchy blouse from the 50s, which does similar with the layers of organza. I think they do it in the sleeve, but it's, again, it's proper clothes. It's, you can see the couture, you can see the time it's coming from originally with Schiaparelli, but interpreted beautifully with that sort of sting of a scorpion nearly, or the sort of shape of something, a predator hunting. But what it basically is, and I think there's lots of clever pattern cutting in it, but if you wanted to make something like that, you could make a sort of blouse. I wonder whether there's a lot of sort of hand painted chiffon in there, but it's something like that. And I think they actually they styled it actually closed, so they styled it like this, but then they have the collar up, so it's basically a blouse like that. But then because it's all on bias, and then they've done the sleeves, this so it's something like that. So the blouse sort of over, and then the sleeve it's got a seam here, which again, because it's organza, looks really amazing. And then I think it might actually have like have a raglan sleeve, so again, a two-piece raglan sleeve, so you get all these sort of lines going through it. And the collar is done in that blue, and I don't know whether they painted it in or whether it's sort of going down, and it's got, again, it's got like a maybe a dart there, or it might just be the layer of the fabric, but you can sort of see how all these layers come together, and there's definitely something happening there. And then of course, because it is organza, all the seams, every single seam becomes like part of a design because it layers through. So all of these in the white cotton would more or less disappear, but because it's an organza, you get the sort of thickness of the seam, of which would be probably a French seam, or it might be a bound seam where you can't do a French seam, or a trimmed dart. That becomes part of the line, so like you're drawing on the fabric. So it's a really beautiful style. And I wonder if they just added the collar in a different color. And then of course, if you wanted to, you could sort of do a peplum to make it more dramatic. But that's what it basically is. So it's classic wearable clothes, not wearable, maybe quite special clothes, but just by changing the shape of a peplum, using a special fabric, making the shoulders quite sculptural, it becomes something really special. But you can then say, oh, you know, I love how all the layers look like, so I'm just going to make myself a pattern I already have, but I make it out of a organza or see-through fabric, and I make all the seams really strong so they show out as part of the design lines. So you can have lots of fun like that, interpreting these ideas for you. Or again, because a lot of the stuff is just happening at the moment is the sort of 90s, 2000s. You can say about, you know, if that's too complicated, again, if you did a, you know, if you did a top and you put in the lines of the darts, and you make this sort of organdy or organza, and you line everything, and you make beautiful hems, and you might do like a hem slightly forward, they all stand out. And organza is basically the silk, which makes it trickier to work with. Organdy is a cotton, which is more stable, stiffer, beautiful to work with, but slightly scratchy to wear, sadly. But you can see how you can have lots of fun sort of looking at, quite out there. I quite like looking at them because they are couture, when it's well done, it's just the best possible thing. And you can just see the craftsmanship. I wanted to show you the last one, which was this one. As I said, what I love about that, looks like a vintage gown, but it's very cleverly done. I'm going to zoom in so you can see the details for a second. This was a very dark show for spring summer, but can you see, it's basically based on a corset, but what they've done, again, very Schiaparelli, it looks like a rabbit ear nearly. But what it basically is, and you can have it rounded, or you can have it with a point, but what they've done is basically something like that. So that's how you get this sort of 3D-ness shape of the bustier. So it's literally something like that. There's lots of stiffening inside. They might have put boning inside, but it might literally just be lots of interfacing out of really stiff fabric, when the body itself looks like it's some sort of silk. but you can see how it's basically it's not very basic, but it's probably it's like a corset again, like a sort of bustier style underneath. And then, oh, Natalie's saying, is the black dress a fox? It could well be. I also saw it was a bit like a sort of, it could be lots of things. I also sort of looked at I get it with the ears. It could be also, it has something quite sort of insect-like about it. So it could be like the sting of a and the pincers of a scorpion, couldn't it? But they basically got this sort of draped on top. So you would you stuff like that you have to do on the body. So you'd cut your corset and then you would drape this on top, and you get exactly the fold you want to, the proportion. But that's how you literally start making things like that. You cut them out, you cut them to size, so you get the right proportion from the shoulder point to the waist, and then it gets layered in underneath. Oh, hello Yolanda, how are you? And I agree with you, they are beautiful clothes instead, indeed. And Natalie's saying, I love all the ruching. Yes, that's what I wanted to really, because that's what stood out for me, because it is a really classic technique. Can you see all these lines there? That is ruching. So, and I think it looks like it might be partly sort of placed on top of it. So what we have is like a sort of big gown. And then what I think they would have done the gown first, and then they would have decided where they sort of want the ruching to be. So it looks like it's sort of the ruching is coming down here. And then it might be either, here it looks like it's literally a top layer. And then here it looks like it might be becoming part of the gown. And then again here it's part of the gown. And then there's probably another layer there. And what ruching is literally, is you choose your fabric, and then you can either put in a channel and a ribbon and you ruche it, or elastic, or in this case I think they literally tucked it. So it's lots of tiny tucks as such, like that, to create that 3D look. And what they have done, of course, for example, here, that would be your, I'm doing a much easier version. But if this was your skirt with your center front, you sort of do your base layer, and then you could either just have it ruched, in which case you would do a cutting line here, and then you would literally just slash it open like this and like that. And if you just had it part of a skirt detail, you would then sort of cut it open that it ends up being like this. And then you would normally put a seam in somewhere because it makes it easier. So this would be your one pattern piece, and then your other pattern piece would be exactly the same. So you sort of spread out your fabric. I've done it really badly. But when you just stitch the two together and ruche them, or in their case, they stitched it over several things. So you can do it out of one fabric as well if you do it more equally, but quite often if you hide a seam in there. And then of course what they've done is this one, that they, because it's becoming separate, then you could literally just slash it all the way to here, and then this becomes the sort of flared frill on there as such. So you then end up with a pattern piece which is literally like this, like that. That's your whole pattern piece, and then these are your sort of your ruching lines. So here you have like that, and when you either set, you literally sort of tuck it every 5 centimeters and stitch it to get that sort of ruching, or you put a channel in. But that's what you do. And of course this becomes separate, and then you might have your rest of your skirt might be stitched to this line. So you might sort of stitch it to there underneath, and then have the skirt underneath holding it in place. So you can see it's a really simple technique. Quite often it's sort of used, for example, if you have your seam at the top of a sleeve. So a really easy way is to just create a seam at the sleeve add all the volume as described, and when you put a channel in and you gather it this way, so that's a lot less over the top. And at the same time, of course, you can add up your sort of frill as such. You can put it anywhere, you can make it quite simple, or you can go completely over top. And Natalie is saying, I wonder how many meters of fabric it used. Yeah, so something like that. If you think even something like this, if you get the sort of amount of ruching I have, it's literally probably a third or something. So a skirt like that, probably 10-15 meters. And then of course, depending on how these pieces end up looking and how you have the grain, you can place them. Not that the placing won't be that easily in the fabric, so we'll definitely take up a lot of fabric. But I thought this is the sort of one where you can see it's a beautiful couture gown, you can admire the techniques, but then you can also think about, oh, I like this technique, I can see that, you know, the simplest one would be down the side seam of a skirt or something like that, or a top. Again, very 90s. I used to have those clothes. But I quite like that. But this does exactly what a really good haute couture collection does. It like, it sets your sort of mind thinking. It makes you appreciate the skill involved, but also the creative direction of it, because the whole collection looks really nicely. Apart from, to finish off with the dress I really didn't understand, but it might be just me, is this, it's just sort of, it's cutting her in half. I find the placement of the flowers very odd. And again, they've done something amazing with the skirt. You can see there's something going on with lots of stitch lines maybe, and how it's going from dark to light. So you can see that part. I love the bottom part. I think it's actually quite clever. If not, again, something with the proportions don't quite work for me. But the top half, again, it might be with the way we're looking at it, like the angle we're looking at it, maybe it looks better from a different angle. Yes, I didn't just quite get that. I thought the rest of them have quite a lot of organic movement, and the way everything is made is sort of it looks at the women wearing it, and it sort of works with them, rather than this seems to be like placed on top of it. But the rest is really beautiful. Oh, and Natalie is saying, remember the beautiful jacket that Balenciaga made with the pleated sleeves? Yes, and that is in... that's a very famous Balenciaga sleeve, where you literally have the pleats going down the arms. It's not similar to it at all, but a similar technique. It's quite clever. Again, it looks like an armadillo or something. That's why I think this looks quite insect-like, scale-like. But a beautiful collection to look at, and I hope that sort of maybe gave you a little bit of a nice design and pattern cutting break away from work, or like Natalie, a little bedtime story about fashion and pattern cutting, and hopefully be dreaming of Schiaparelli in beautiful clothes, Natalie, all night, and not of scorpions on crocodiles. Anyway, that's it for me for today. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this little look at Schiaparelli Haute Couture 2026. Do give me a thumbs up if you did. That'd be very much appreciated. And I'll be back on Wednesday at exactly the same time, and I'll be looking at Do Your Haute Couture, and quite a different collection with some lovely bits, and again, some bits I just